In the shadowy world of organized crime, some names are whispered with a mix of fear and respect. These are the names of men who build empires not in boardrooms but in the dark alleys and unforgiving concrete jungles of our cities. One such name is Arturo Castellanos. To the outside world, he might just be another inmate number in a vast prison system. But inside, he is a figure of immense power. He is known by his alias, Tablas. This name commands authority. Castellanos is a made member of the notorious Mexican mafia, or La IME. His story is a chilling look into how power can thrive even in the most controlled environments on Earth. His life is a roadmap of the American gang landscape. It starts on the streets and ends behind the thickest walls imaginable. Yet for Castellanos, a life sentence was not the end of his influence. In many ways, it was just the beginning. He became a general, a shot caller, a kingpin ruling from a throne inside a tiny cell. His story forces us to ask difficult questions. How can a man locked away from society continue to direct criminal enterprises? How does a prison, designed to contain and punish, become the headquarters for a powerful criminal organization? We need to understand his journey to grasp the complex reality of gangs in our prison systems. Arturo Castellanos' influence extends far beyond the prison walls. His orders, passed through clandestine messages, could mean life or death for people on the outside. He allegedly controlled drug trafficking, extortion, and violence across Southern California, all while being held in one of the most secure prisons in the United States. His tale is not just about one man's rise to power. It is a story about the systems that inadvertently allow such power to grow. It is about the deep-rooted nature of gang culture and its incredible resilience. To truly understand the challenges facing law enforcement and prison officials, we have to look closely at the life of men like Tablas. This journey into the life of Arturo Castellanos is a deep dive into a world most of us will never see. It is a world governed by its own set of rules, its own code of honor, and its own brutal form of justice. We will explore his beginnings, his crimes, and his incredible rise within the prison hierarchy. We will see how he manipulated the system and wielded his power to become one of the most significant figures in the Mexican mafia. His story is a critical piece of the puzzle when we talk about organized crime, prison reform, and the ongoing battle to control the influence of gangs both inside and outside prison walls. It is a sobering reminder that sometimes the most dangerous men are the ones already locked away. Arturo Castellanos was not born a kingpin. His story, like so many others, begins in the tough neighborhoods of Los Angeles. He grew up in an environment where options seemed limited and the pull of the streets was strong. This is where he first found a sense of belonging, not in a community center or a school club, but with a street gang. He joined Florencia 13, one of the largest and most notorious Hispanic gangs in Los Angeles County. For a young man like Castellanos, the gang offered protection, identity, and a twisted sense of family. It was a path that promised respect, but it was paved with violence and crime. In the world of Florencia 13, survival meant proving your loyalty and toughness. Castellanos quickly learned the rules of this dangerous game. He became involved in the gang's criminal activities, which were a daily reality in his neighborhood. These weren't petty crimes. They were serious offenses that fueled the gang's power and reputation. Drug dealing, assaults, and territorial disputes were part of his education on the streets. He was not just a follower. He was showing the potential for leadership. He was learning how to navigate a world where violence was a tool and fear was a currency. This early life shaped the man he would become. His reputation within Florencia 13 grew with each passing year. He was seen as someone who was willing to do what was necessary to protect the gang's interests and expand its territory. This dedication did not go unnoticed. The gang hierarchy recognized his potential. He was being groomed for bigger things. The streets of South Los Angeles were his training ground, a place where he honed the skills of intimidation and strategic violence. Every action he took further enmeshed him in a life of crime, making it nearly impossible to turn back. He had chosen his path, and it was leading him toward a direct and brutal confrontation with the law. This period of his life was crucial. It laid the foundation for his future role as a leader. The lessons he learned in Florencia 13 about loyalty, power, and control would become the very principles he would use to rule within the prison system. The streets taught him that power wasn't given, it was taken. This brutal education prepared him for a world even more ruthless than the one he knew. It was only a matter of time before his escalating criminal activities would lead to a consequence from which there was no escape. His journey with Florencia 13 was the first chapter in a long and violent story. The life of a dedicated gang member often leads to one of two outcomes: a premature death or a long prison sentence. For Arturo Castellanos, it would be the latter. His deepening involvement in the violent activities of Florencia 13 put him on a collision course with the justice system. The specific crime that sealed his fate was a murder. In the eyes of the law, it was a brutal act that demanded the most severe punishment. In the world of the gang, it may have been seen as an act of loyalty or a necessary step to maintain power. Regardless of the motive, the consequence was absolute. Castellanos was arrested, tried, and convicted. The trial revealed the cold realities of gang warfare. Witnesses testified, evidence was presented, and a picture was painted of a young man fully committed to a life of crime. For the jury, the decision was clear. Arturo Castellanos was found guilty of murder. The judge handed down the harshest sentence possible: life in prison without the possibility of parole. At that moment, it seemed like his story was over. He would be sent away to spend the rest of his natural life behind bars, removed from the society he had terrorized. The system had worked, or so it appeared. A dangerous criminal was taken off the streets for good. But for Castellanos, this was not an end, it was a transition. As the heavy steel doors of the prison slammed shut behind him, he was not entering a place of defeat. He was entering a new arena, a new battlefield where his skills could be put to use. The California prison system was, and still is, a world unto itself. It has its own social structures, its own economies, and its own power brokers. For a man with Castellanos' background and mindset, it was a place filled with opportunity. He was no longer just a member of Florencia 13 on the streets. He was now entering the major leagues of prison gangs. The life sentence was meant to be a final punishment, a declaration that his criminal career was finished. Instead, it became the catalyst for his rise to an even greater level of influence. The conviction for murder, a mark of ultimate transgression in the outside world, became a badge of honor in the brutal hierarchy of the prison system. It solidified his reputation as a man capable of extreme violence, a quality highly valued in the world he was about to conquer. The crime that defined his life on the outside became the key that unlocked the door to power on the inside. His real reign was just about to begin. Upon entering the California prison system, Arturo Castellanos found himself in an environment teeming with established gangs and racial tensions. This was a world where survival depended on alliances and strength. For a Hispanic inmate with a serious conviction and a history with a major street gang, the path was almost predetermined. He was a natural candidate for recruitment into the powerful prison gang known as the Mexican Mafia, or La M. This organization was the pinnacle of power for Hispanic inmates. It controlled drug trafficking, extortion, and violence both inside and outside the prison walls. Gaining membership was a difficult and often bloody process. Castellanos did not just survive in this new, brutal environment. He thrived. His reputation from the streets preceded him. His murder conviction and his unwavering loyalty to the gang ethos made him a valuable asset. He quickly proved himself to be intelligent, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. These were the qualities that La M looked for in its members. He carried out orders without question and demonstrated a strategic mind that set him apart from other inmates. He understood that real power in prison was not just about physical strength. It was about control, organization, and the ability to inspire fear and loyalty in equal measure. His rise through the ranks was methodical. He built relationships with established members of the Mexican Mafia, earning their trust and respect. He took on responsibilities and executed them flawlessly. Over time, he was no longer just a soldier. He was becoming a leader. He was eventually made, or formally inducted, into the secretive Brotherhood of La M. This elevated his status immensely. He was now one of the elite, a colonel who had a say in the gang's operations across the entire state. He had successfully transitioned from being a street-level gang member to a high-ranking figure in a sophisticated criminal organization. His ultimate destination was Pelican Bay State Prison, one of the most notorious supermax facilities in the country. This prison was designed to house the worst of the worst, the most violent and influential inmates in the system. Castellanos was sent to the Security Housing Unit, or SGU, a place of extreme isolation. But even here, locked in a small concrete cell for over 22 hours a day, his power only grew. From this isolated perch, he became one of the key leaders of the Mexican mafia. He had reached the top of the prison food chain, proving that for some, even the highest security measures are not enough to contain their influence. To understand Arturo Castellanos' power, one must first understand the Mexican mafia. LAIM is not just a prison gang, it is a powerful syndicate. It was formed in the late 1950s by a group of Hispanic street gang members at the Dual Vocational Institution. Their goal was to protect Hispanic inmates from other gangs and from the prison staff. Over the decades, it evolved into a criminal organization that controls the majority of Hispanic street gangs in Southern California. Gangs on the outside, like Castellanos' own Florencia 13, pay taxes to LAIM. In return, they receive protection and permission to operate in their territories. Membership in the Mexican Mafia is for life. It is a blood-in, blood-out organization. To become a member or carnal, an individual must be sponsored by an existing member and approved by a vote. The process is secretive and highly selective. Candidates must have a proven history of violence and unwavering loyalty. Once a man is made, he is a brother for life. The penalty for betraying the organization is death. This strict code is what gives LAIM its strength and discipline. It operates more like a paramilitary group than a loose-knit gang, with a clear chain of command and a set of rigid rules. Arturo Castellanos, as a made member, held a position of immense authority within this structure. Along with a handful of other leaders, he formed a council that governed the organization's activities. From their cells in Pelican Bay's SHU, they made decisions that had far-reaching consequences. They decided which street gangs would be taxed, who would be targeted for violence, and how drug profits would be distributed. Their control was so absolute that they could start or stop gang wars on the streets of Los Angeles with a single order. Castellanos was not just an inmate, he was a CEO of a vast and violent criminal enterprise. The power of the Mexican mafia lies in its ability to project force beyond the prison walls. Through girlfriends, corrupt lawyers, and coded messages, the leaders communicate their orders to the outside world. Street gangs know that defying an order from LAIM will result in being put on a green light list, which means they can be attacked or killed by any other gang loyal to the Mexican mafia. This system of control ensures that the leaders, like Castellanos, remain powerful and feared, even while physically isolated from the world. They had built a kingdom where the walls of a prison were no barrier to their reign. How does a man locked in a supermax cell command an army of gang members on the outside? For Arturo Castellanos and the other leaders of the Mexican mafia, the answer was surprisingly low-tech. They used kites. A kite is prison slang for a written message. These were not simple notes. They were often tiny pieces of paper, with minuscule handwriting designed to be easily hidden and smuggled. These kites were the lifeblood of their criminal empire. They contained orders for murders, instructions for drug deals, and lists of gangs that were expected to pay taxes. The pen truly was mightier than the sword. The process of moving these kites was a complex and clandestine operation. A message written by Castellanos would be passed from one inmate to another, often through hidden means. It might be hidden in a book, passed during a brief moment in the yard, or even carried by a sympathetic or corrupt prison guard. Eventually, the kite would make its way to an inmate who was being released, or to a visitor. Once outside the prison walls, the message would be delivered to high-ranking gang members on the streets. The instructions would then be carried out without question. This intricate communication network allowed the leaders to maintain real-time control over their operations. The language used in these kites was often coded. The leaders used metaphors and seemingly innocent phrases to disguise their true meaning. A piñata party might be an order for a murder. A bill might refer to a drug debt that needed to be collected. This made it difficult for prison officials to decipher the messages even if they were intercepted. Castellanos was a master of this form of communication. His written orders were precise and left no room for interpretation by his subordinates. He was a micromanager, directing the flow of money and violence from hundreds of miles away, all through the power of his pen. This method of control highlights a major challenge for the prison system. Officials could lock a man's body in a cell, but they could not lock away his mind or his influence. The simple act of writing and passing a note became a powerful weapon. Castellanos and his fellow leaders turned the prison's own communication channels against it. They exploited every possible loophole to maintain their grip on power. The flow of kites demonstrated that physical isolation was not enough to stop a determined and organized leader. It showed that the battle against organized crime had to be fought not just on the streets, but within the very institutions designed to contain it. In 2013, the California prison system was rocked by a massive hunger strike. Nearly 30,000 inmates across the state refused to eat. They were protesting the conditions of long-term solitary confinement in the security housing units. The strike was a huge logistical and public relations nightmare for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. It drew international attention and sparked a debate about the humanity of prolonged isolation. On the surface, it appeared to be a spontaneous uprising by desperate inmates. But behind the scenes it was a carefully orchestrated event, and Arturo Castellanos was one of its chief architects. The hunger strike was not just a protest, it was a massive display of power by the leaders of the prison gangs. The leaders of the four main racial groups in prison, the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, and the Northern Structure, put aside their violent rivalries to unite for a common cause. From their isolated cells in Pelican Bay, Castellanos and the other leaders issued the order to begin the strike. They used their kite communication network to coordinate the effort across multiple prisons. The fact that tens of thousands of inmates obeyed their command was a stunning demonstration of their absolute authority. For Castellanos, the hunger strike served multiple purposes. It was a way to pressure the prison system to change the policies that kept him and other leaders in isolation. If they could get out of the HU and into the general population, it would be much easier for them to communicate and run their criminal enterprises. It was also a way to show the world, and their own followers, just how powerful they were. They proved that they could bring the largest prison system in the country to its knees without lifting a single weapon. They used the system's own concern for inmate welfare against it. The strike eventually ended after 60 days, with prison officials agreeing to review the policies on solitary confinement. While not all of the inmates' demands were met, the leaders had made their point. They had shown that their influence was undiminished by the concrete and steel of Pelican Bay. Arturo Castellanos had solidified his position as a man who could command not just a gang, but a multiracial army of inmates. The hunger strike was a masterstroke of strategy, a peaceful protest used as a weapon of war. It was a clear message that the kings of the prison system were still on their thrones. Despite being locked away for life, Arturo Castellanos never stopped being a target for law enforcement. Federal investigators were keenly aware of his ongoing role as a leader of the Mexican Mafia. They spent years building a new case against him and other high-ranking members. They gathered evidence of his control over criminal activities on the outside. They intercepted kites, turned informants, and used wiretaps to piece together the full extent of his criminal empire. They were determined to prove that a life sentence was not enough to stop him, and that he needed to be held accountable for his continued crimes. In 2016, the federal government unsealed a massive racketeering indictment against Castellanos and dozens of other Mexican Mafia members and associates. The charges were extensive and serious. They included drug trafficking, extortion, and money laundering. The indictment alleged that Castellanos, from his cell in Pelican Bay, was directing the flow of methamphetamine and heroin onto the streets of Los Angeles and Orange County. It detailed how he ordered the collection of taxes from street gangs and authorized violence against those who did not comply. The government was trying to dismantle the entire organization from the top down. The indictment was a major blow to the Mexican Mafia. It laid bare the inner workings of the organization for all to see. It showed how Castellanos and the other leaders used contraband cell phones and coded messages to run their business. It also charged his wife, who was accused of acting as a conduit for his orders on the outside. This move was designed to cut off his communication lines and isolate him even further. The federal case was a clear statement that no one is beyond the reach of the law, no matter how deep inside the prison system they are buried. For Castellanos, the new federal charges added another layer to his life sentence. While he was already destined to die in prison, a federal conviction would likely lead to even more restrictive custody, possibly in a federal supermax prison like ADX Florence in Colorado. The legal battle was a continuation of the war he had been fighting his entire life. It was a chess match between a brilliant criminal mind and a determined justice system. The case highlighted the immense difficulty of prosecuting individuals who commit their crimes from behind bars, and the constant need for vigilance by law enforcement to combat the enduring power of prison gangs. The story of Arturo Castellanos is more than just a biography of a notorious criminal. It is a case study in the persistence of organized crime and the complex challenges of our modern prison system. His life demonstrates how individuals can adapt to even the most restrictive environments and continue to wield enormous power. He is a symbol of the shortcomings of a correctional model focused solely on containment. Locking a person away does not necessarily stop their criminal influence. In some cases, it can refine and expand it. Castellanos' legacy is a stark reminder that the fight against organized crime requires more than just prisons. His influence has forced a re-evaluation of prison management strategies. The 2013 hunger strike he helped lead brought the issue of long-term solitary confinement to the forefront of public debate, leading to significant policy changes in California. While his motives were self-serving, the outcome sparked a broader conversation about human rights and rehabilitation. His ability to control a criminal empire through kites and other clandestine methods has also pushed law enforcement to develop more sophisticated intelligence-gathering techniques within correctional facilities. He represents a type of criminal who challenges the very purpose and effectiveness of incarceration. The tale of Arturo Castellanos is crucial for anyone seeking to understand the dynamics of gang culture today. It shows the powerful allure of these organizations and the deep-seated loyalty they command. It illustrates the seamless connection between street gangs and prison gangs, forming a continuous cycle of violence and crime. His story is a warning that ignoring the power structures within prisons can have deadly consequences for communities on the outside. As long as figures like Castellanos can rule from behind bars, the problem of gang violence will remain deeply entrenched in our society. Ultimately, the legacy of the prison kingpin is a complex one. He is a murderer and the leader of a ruthless criminal organization responsible for untold suffering. Yet his story also holds important lessons about power, control, and the resilience of the human will, for better or for worse. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our justice system and the societal issues that give rise to gangs in the first place. Understanding the life of Arturo Castellanos is not about glorifying a criminal. It is about learning from a dark chapter of our history to build a safer and more just future. His shadow looms large over the ongoing debate about crime, punishment, and reform.